Welcome back to the farm. My name's Roz, also known as Passion Flower, and you'll find me here each week talking about my farming and creative life. We did some work on the inside of the shed this week. We actually installed walls. Well, kind of walls, more like partitions to separate my workshop and crafting space from the area where we're keeping all of the farming equipment. We looked at a whole lot of different options, ways that we could separate the space. We already have racking in place, but it is quite see-through, and we thought it needed to have some kind of solid wall or partition just to break up the space a little bit better and to make my end a little bit more cozy. We looked at framing and cladding, fabric, a whole lot of different things, some quite expensive and some from recycled and free things from around the farm. What we settled on was using some corrugated iron. We had some long sheets and we thought if we could connect them together and make a panel, that we would then be able to put those up, and that would make a really good screen, fairly light, and sort of match in with what the shed already looks like. So we were able to put wooden beams up and then attach the corrugated iron to that. My side is the sort of the plain unweathered side, and the weathered rusted side is facing in to the farm side of the shed. I was thinking maybe I would paint the tin, but having seen it up now, I'm really pleased with how it looks quite natural. I'm thinking I could potentially put some pieces of art on the walls to sort of brighten it up a little bit, but keep it fairly neutral, and then have my furniture and other things like that sort of create the warmth within the room. So far we've only done the walls in my crafting space and sort of through to about the middle of the shed, and have left it open on my desk and dining area space. Still kind of trying to figure out how we're going to work that part. We might end up putting a more solid wall in there, but we've just done this bit for the time being to sort of try it out, I guess, too. And so far I'm really liking it. I also did some repair work on the old wardrobe. I cleaned it all up, and I've decided that I'm not going to paint it. I think I'm just going to leave it as it is right now. I have fixed the base and the backboard. It was warped, so I had to like nail that back into place. And I've also had to straighten up one of the locks. It was bent, so I've straightened that up. I just need to get some little screws again to put that back into place. So it's all working properly now. And with it clean, I think that it just looks better in its natural state. I don't want to mess with it too much. I'm also thinking that I will do the same with the buffet. I'll just give it a really, really good clean. I've started by spraying WD-40 on all of the hinges and on the rails for the sliding doors at the top. And I think just by being really careful and giving a little bit of love that way, I will leave it as it is for the time being. I can always decide to paint it later if I think that it needs it. But with the tin wall now, and with the things that I've already painted and sort of starting to bring everything together, I just feel that I don't need to sort of go down that path with these more vintage pieces of furniture. I repaired that sock that I was talking about last week. It had a little hole right at the connection at the heel, and when I had a closer look, it was actually the sock yarn, not the heel yarn, that had come apart. I think I'd caught the very end where I'd woven in the end originally, and it had just popped out. So with a darning needle, I was able to weave that back in. It was really, really short tail. So I've got a little tip for how I do that with a short tail, so that you don't have to try and get more yarn to try and weave your ends in. Instead of putting your yarn into the eye of your needle and then trying to weave it in, put your needle into the fabric where you intend to weave in, so where you want the yarn to go, until you just have the eye of the needle sticking out. Then pop the weaving in yarn piece into the eye of the needle and pull that through. Then set up where your next bit of your weaving in is going to go by sticking your needle into the fabric, and then pop the yarn back into the eye of the needle and pull that bit through. That way you can get a really short piece of yarn woven in, whereas if you had tried to put it into the needle first, you would keep pulling the yarn out of the needle because you don't have the movement and the leverage to be able to have the whole length of needle go in because your yarn is so short. And now I have a new sock cast on the needles. I'm actually knitting 2 at a time. I don't even know what yarn this is. It didn't have a ball band, and this is some hand dyed of my own that I just had some scraps. This is actually a commission knit for a customer. She saw me knitting lots of socks and asked if I'll be able to knit some socks for her. So I'm knitting them 2 at a time for a couple of reasons. This way I don't have to count rows, and they should end up looking pretty much exactly the same. And it also means that I will not end up with second sock syndrome because they'll both be done at the same time. I'll talk a little bit more about these next week and talk a bit more about how I knit my socks 2 at a time. And yes, I actually have a finished object. As you can see, I'm wearing my hand spun honey cowl, and I'm so pleased with how it's turned out. The colours look really great. I'm so happy that I applied the colourful singles with a solid. And I'm also happy that I used a slip stitch pattern. It sort of managed to balance out a lot of the thick and thin that I had in my spin to create a really beautiful fabric. It worked out to be a really great length and a really great width. It's not quite as deep as my previous honey cowl, but this fabric is not quite as drapey, so it's keeping the back of my neck really warm because it's staying upright, but it's still soft enough and squishy that it really comes together around your neck really well, and it doesn't feel solid, but it's just got a little bit of structure. I said last week that I was hoping that I'd be able to get a beanie out of the leftovers because I was sort of a bit more than halfway through and the ball seemed to be quite large, and I thought that I would surely have enough. But I didn't gauge that very well at all. I only ended up with this little piece left. It seemed that second half of this cowl took a long time to grow, and it also ate up a lot of yarn. I felt like I kept knitting and knitting and knitting, and it wasn't getting any wider. And then all of a sudden it was there. I don't really know what I'm going to do with this little piece of yarn. It's not obviously not going to make a project by itself. So I'll probably just keep it as like a little keepsake of this first hand spun project that I was able to make. But now I have this amazing cowl that is beautiful and squishy and has just come up so well. And is really the perfect winter accessory. Well, that's it for another week. Thanks for spending some time with me. If you're enjoying these videos, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the farm. Bye.